G'day everyone, it's Matt here, and today I've got a very special guest, Ewen Finser from Venture Forth Media. And the reason I've asked Ewen to come along and chat to us all is Ewen is building a significant portfolio of 6- and 7-figure websites. And what his superpower is, wait till you hear this, guys. Ewen loves building sites and building, basically incubating them from the ground up. And Ewan's big on SEO as well. So thank you so much for coming along, Ewen, and speaking to our community.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for including me.
Yeah, fantastic. And so let's jump into your, let's actually look at where you are now, because I know you've been doing this for quite a few years, and we'll touch on that in the interview. And you've obviously bought and sold quite a few websites. But now it seems you're more into obviously building them from zero, from scratch.
Yeah, so it's kind of been an evolution. I think I started like so many of your community probably starts with limited capital and maybe some time, some energy to put into it. And so I, back in 2013, 2014, built the sites myself. Started with one site, then did 2, 3, 4. Literally did all the functions from, setting up the hosting to doing some amateur web design, writing content, doing all the marketing around that, link building, what have you. And then kind of evolving over the last 6, 7, 8 years into more of a developed operation where we can hire writers and hire project managers and kind of a C-suite, if you will, at the top. And I always thought, the reason why I'm building sites is because one day I can go buy them, Yeah. And I tried that and, had some success, some failures with acquiring websites. We can get into that at some point. But, kind of came full circle back to the idea of we actually our team has this special kind of unique approach to incubating sites. We have unique experience. What if we did that in a more organized and disciplined way and just approached that with the same rigor and discipline we would an acquisition, but just do it from the ground up and do it at scale and do it in batches. And so, that's kind of where I've come to. And really, for me, it's about competence and about risk mitigation. And so those two things are why I focus on ground ups as opposed to maybe acquisitions. At a large scale.
So we should mention, obviously you and I are introduced through Joe Valley at Quiet Light Brokerage. And one of the things that caught my eye, Joe said to me, "Oh, Matt, I'm working with this fantastic, lovely guy. You'll get on really well with him, but wait till you hear how he does his SEO as well." And that's what it really intrigued me, what your thoughts are around, because, we all love SEO and it's been hugely successful for all of us. And so in talking to you though as well, I realized you have gone on the journey that a lot of people go on in our community, which is both building and buying. So in terms of the buying side, you've sold and bought some quite sizable websites, haven't you?
Yeah. So I think, at the high end, sold a 7-figure, acquired 7-figure, some mid 6-figure exits, acquired some mid low 6 figures. So I've kind of been on both sides for sure. Also done a lot of micro acquisitions, sub 50K. But I've seen the big ones and I've seen the ones in between. And I'll say big ones in air quotes because that's for my experience. I think for a big media company, $1 million is peanuts. But for me, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, when you're working from home and so. For you, so you've gone on this whole journey. You've kind of you've got now experience over this last since 2013 you're doing. You've got the experience from quite small sites, big sites, building sites. So very similar to Liz and I actually, and that's why it's so fascinating to talk to someone like yourself and share ideas and swap notes. But what I'm really interested in is why. And then we'll get into some strategy, but why have you decided after all this time doing both? I noticed 2 big things that you said to me the other day, which is you found building sites is more your sweet spot. And also though, when you do acquisitions now, your preference is actually, do you want to mention what your preference is? It's for
Yeah. So what we've realized coming at that competence point is that we have this system for sourcing writers, managing writers, even the software system we've built to the end-to-end kind of conveyor belt, like we call it the content conveyor belt. And so we have this unique superpower. And so what's the best way to leverage that? Well, I think right now with where multiples are and kind of the risks associated with acquisitions, we've said, look, the smaller the acquisition, the better. And if we can't find it on the market, which is almost always the case, we don't find the right quality or the size, we're going to incubate. We're going to build it from scratch. And so that's really, where we've focused on more so because that's where we can extract the most value versus a large acquisition. Sometimes when you're acquiring a site, let's say with 300, 400, 500 pieces of content or more, what you're really acquiring is kind of a defensive playbook. Yes, there might be some growth opportunities, but you have to keep the ship sailing and keep the leaks plugged. And that's, we have experience with that, but I would say I'd rather be playing the other game I'd rather be playing offense than defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so now what you're doing, you've got funding behind you, and you are currently, your strategy is to launch sites like en masse. It seems that's basically your strategy.
Yeah, so I think this interesting kind of point here is that my experience up until maybe 2017 was launching sites as I could, right? It's kind of the bootstrapped entrepreneur lifestyle business. Maybe 1 month I need to take it out for a down payment on a house, so I'm kind of balancing these different priorities. Or some months I'm reinvesting this into existing sites, and some months I'm launching a bunch of new ones, really just based on what I'm seeing, but in a very disorganized, I would say undisciplined type of way. It worked, right? But I didn't, at the end of the day, I couldn't really understand what exactly was causing the growth. It was hard to follow. And so when I made this decision to go back to content and really raise capital against that, from outside investors, what I wanted to do is do it in a disciplined, measured way. And so I read this book, Good to Great by Jim Collins, and all his other material. He's a kind of a great thought leader. And there's a whole bunch of concepts I love. The 20-mile march. There's a whole bunch of other ones that I really internalized with our team. But one of the ones I really hung on to was fire bullets and then cannonballs. And the idea is that if you have a reserve of capital or energy or resources, you don't want to expend all of that gunpowder, as you will, on one big shot. So he uses the analogy of there's, two ships at sea, maybe they're in the age of sail, man of war, one's bearing down the other, and, you see the target, you turn to face it. And then you have this choice. Do you fire all of your gunpowder at once and try to take them out? Or do you try to fire like a tracing shot first, maybe with, 10% or 5% of your ammo. And then you miss left, but then you adjust, you miss right, but then you sort of box your way in until you hit the target. Once you hit the other ship with the little, let's say, grape shot, then you say, okay, now we've hit metal. Now we fire the big cannonball. And that's the important distinction. It's holding these two concepts that are seemingly opposed, but in balance, knowing of, doing this limited validation to really get on target. But then once you're on target, realizing what you have and firing everything you have at that target. And so that's kind of my macro thesis and why I'm focused on doing content at scales, because I think we've hit the target, so to speak. We just need to scale it with capital and content and do more sites. And so what we try to do, even at the portfolio level, is follow this fire bullets and cannonballs approach. So it's very important for us to launch all of the sites at the exact same time with the exact same capital input. They could be in different verticals, but each site, let's say, gets 15 to 16, maybe $17,000 worth of content. It's maybe 50% of our allocation, 60% of our allocation overall goes into firing bullets, and we fire wide. So our last launch, we raised $800,000. We fired our bullets, 26 site launches in 5 weeks. Each site, we want to get over 120 articles and kind of let them sit. And then we go into a period of like rest and refit where we're not doing anything at all. besides, some basic, we do a basic outreach, link building campaign, do some social media, very basic. But then we let all the sites sit for about 6 to 9 months. And I kind of look at it like it's like a vintage of wine. You kind of let them, mature. And then, right around the 12-month mark, we start to see which of these sites, which of these assumptions that we put out there are proving to be more interesting than others. And so it's a gut check. It's, I think I have the best ideas. I think I have great ideas for new sites, but honestly, I don't know. Even the best keyword research tools can't really tell you, the truth. They're approximations. So you kind of have to see what the market says, what Google says about your sites. And then we double down. We take the reserve gunpowder, if you will, and we fire it back into maybe the top 20% of the sites, or maybe it's the top, 40%, but whatever it is, we double down on the ones that have proven to us that they're worth doubling down on. So it's really a pathfinding exercise more than it is necessarily an exercise in scale. We want to figure out first where to go, and then double down on that. And so, that's a little bit about kind of the overview of our process and why we do what we do.
Yeah, so that works for you. So to me, as an old time, compared to you, I'm an old time SEOer, and I was saying to Joe Valley, that's not how. It's not even how we teach it. We teach you need to, over time, I guess in essence, drip feed the content onto the site to make it look natural. And in my day, I sound old here, but in my day, putting all your content onto a site in one hit was kind of a no-no, because it could, it's just not how normal sites are built back then. But it seems, I've been asking around since I heard this idea, and it seems like, this is a new thing that people are talking about. People like yourself are finding you can now stick all your content in one hit onto a website, which is absolutely fantastic for time management, because it is a lot easier to stick putting 120 articles onto a content site. There's more work than meets the eye behind that, especially when you're across 25 websites. So it's a fantastically effective way of doing it if it works really well. And obviously that's what your team's geared up to do.
Yeah, we're all optimized around this conveyor belt. We keep we have various different companies and funds that are either in launch phase. We kind of plan it out on the calendar. Every year we try to do 1 or 2 of these launches, and that's the plan moving forward. And just keep the gears moving and keep improving in the feedback loop. Keep the feedback loop, refining the process every time. So in theory, part of I think in business and life in general, like when someone says, get in the arena, it's about getting repetitions when you're working out, whatever it is. And so for us, we want to get as many repetitions in as quickly as we can in a measured way, so we can understand cause and effect. Because if you just fired a site per month, you'd kind of get caught up in, you'd have to be balancing against time and what's the better investment? Well, is it because it's older? Is it because it's been around longer? And so you might get caught in a scenario where you don't really know what's working, or even if it is working, you're not sure why. And so that's why we do the cohort. Another reason we do the cohort analysis.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's funny, in our community, everyone knows I have a saying that I got from Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is reps, reps, reps. You've always got to do the reps, reps, reps. And that's been a big success principle for Liz and I. And so to be clear, for what I want to point out to everyone at this point is, Ewen has obviously done the reps, reps, reps over the years, and he's very successful already with buying and selling websites. And you all heard he learn how to build his websites first. So I think one of the important things, Ewen, that I was going to ask, I'm presuming, with your experience, these articles are obviously very high quality articles. They're SEO'd, you're doing, really good titles, subtitles, all that. So these are not your average kind of written articles that you see on cheap websites for sale type thing.
We spend a lot of time, another kind of part of our secret recipe, if you will. It's not that secret, it's more of a consistency thing, is we spend a lot of time sourcing writers up front and finding really high quality experts. And you might hear this thing with Google, EAT, they talk about the expertise, authority, and trust. we want to feature our writers. We're not about putting up anonymous content or, ordering content from some service provider. We own the content. Content is the product, and it's very important for us to make that the priority. At the end of the day, that's the only thing I care about, like in terms of the QA process is, are we producing high quality content, regardless of if it's video or written content? We follow the SEO best practices, the title tags, but ultimately what we're optimizing for is serving the user. And I know that's like a little bit esoteric, and a lot of people say that, but that's what we think about. We think about what should we be optimizing for? And I think there's a lot of short-term SEO tactics that are the flavor of the month, and people are successful with them, but I think what we try to align for, rather than trying to stay up to date with the latest, include this snippet or that snippet, or the dates in your title tag or not. We try to say, okay, we see where Google's trying to go, right? Even if they're not necessarily explicit or they're opaque or hard to understand. We say, let's optimize for that future that they want, which is high quality, expert written content from passionate people that are in the space. And so we bias towards hiring passionate, experienced writers as opposed to professional copywriters. In fact, we'd rather not have a copywriter because they're coming from a different background that's not really relevant to the niches we enter.
Yeah. So with the, are you happy to mention, just so our guys understand, these are not complex sites. These are just, in essence, these are your standard affiliate or, content sites, aren't they? You've got advertising, affiliate on them in your standard niches that we all go into when we're online.
So I would say one thing I've actually kind of changed my mind about recently is we think of our sites as content brands, not content sites, it's maybe a subtle distinction.
Okay.
But I think what we're trying to solve for is when you visit the site, you don't necessarily want to know that you've landed on a quote unquote affiliate site. You've landed on, you want to feel like as a user, as a reader, you've landed on the go-to resource for this vertical that you're passionate about. And so, yes, we use affiliate CPA offers. We do a lot of that. We have a whole monetization team we've built out we're building relationships with these brands, which is great. But we're also doing display ads, we're doing programmatic, and we've recently started doing direct placements with kind of boutique advertising with brands, really working with the brands to figure out what they want, but doing it in a way that's very natural. And, I'd like to say, if you visit any of our sites, you'd say, oh, this is an interesting hobbyist site or an interesting enthusiast site about this topic. It's not necessarily, the Wirecutter, to give an example, which is a great site and they do an amazing job, but that's not really, we're not trying to be reviews.com. We're trying to be authoritative community of experts around this area, whether it's product reviews or informational tutorial content or video. We try to take a holistic approach to it.
And are you happy to share like some of the typical niches that you might go into, or how you find the niches?
Yeah. So, that's what I actually enjoy the most of all the things we do, is doing that digging, right? I love looking at trends, macro trends, micro trends, keyword research, advertising trends, and finding the gaps in the market. I'd say that's the thing that is not scalable on purpose, because you can't really outsource, the inspiration for a business or for a site. I think that has to be something that's closely held and developed by the CEO, founder, chief operator. And so, we look at, there's a couple things I riff on, and I find these thematic things in the market. There's certain pockets of content. Let's say, I'm trying to give a good example. Maybe 3 years ago, you could say it was pets. Pets was a good one a couple of years ago, where you could go into that space and there wasn't a whole lot of good information. So kind of thinking about that, all the different types of pets you can own, all the different pain points. And I like kind of thinking about it at different levels and different microscope zooms, if you will. There's the thematic content zoom of, what is this niche about? And then there's also the monetization layer. How could you monetize it? And then there's like the subspecialization so I'll give you a good example with pets. You can think of it as a generalist pet site that covers A to Z, everything about pets. Then you can
Yep.
break it into pet insurance. You could say we could create a site just about pet insurance. That's a big enough market that you could target. Or you could talk about, you could talk about cats. You could talk about dogs. You could go down breed specific sites that are geared just towards corgis or labradoodles, whatever it is, and create content just around that. You could focus on pet food. I think there's a big site called Pet Food Advisor, very successful. You can focus on pet gear, pet furniture, like breaking apart and really dissecting the market and finding those little entry points, those subtle, slight edges where with topical focus, you can outswing a lot of these big, well-established players. A lot of the big media companies, they're going broad. To them, to IAC, to Dotdash, big US company, they're what's niche to them is liquor.com is very niche to them. They think that's a cute niche brand. To me, scotch.com or bourbon.com is fairly broad.
So
I think as operators, by going kind of niche and focusing in, not like an exact match domain so much as a focused area. So that's one way I look at it. I also look at I call late stage e-commerce adoption. So where are the markets that are just coming online now? A good example of this might be like, I was looking the other day, you can order, at least in the US, you can order lumber or kind of wood, for house building. You can order that online now. There's direct to consumer lumber. And that wasn't a thing 3 or 4 years ago. And so what are the things that just now are starting to realize that e-com growth hockey stick? And so maybe it's shying away from some of the things that are overdone and focusing on the ones that are just now kind of a good example is actually wine and spirits. A couple of years ago, it was very hard, at least in the US, because of all the legal restrictions around it.
Same here in Australia.
Yeah, and so that's opening up, that's changing, and so that's an interesting market. And so I try to look at things like that too.
Okay, so in essence, you're picking everyday niches that are in front of us all the time. But there's nothing, and you don't mind, and there can be micro niches even.
Yeah, and there's maybe some tactical things around, the size of the keyword volume. I focus more on what's the basket of topics you could go after versus an individual keyword or something. But, I generally like to see a few hundred, searches per month at least.
Okay.
That's ideally the head terms, let's say the best, whatever, the made categories are over 1,000. That's just a little rule of thumb if you're trying to narrow it down.
Okay, perfect. And let's have a look, like for yourself. So I guess another interesting question for you, so people realize your background. Like everyone's sitting here going, wow, you're building these massive big sites now. When you look back over your journey, tell us a picture. What's your background, Ewen? What did you originally like, and then we'll go, how did you get into this?
Yeah. So I guess my background was desperation. Like so many people, I graduated college or university 2012, and I got a desk job in kind of a cubicle, typical kind of corporate enviurement.
Well, what did you do at uni?
I studied political science, so nothing related to business at all.
Okay. So you're not a techie type person or anything like that?
No. I barely know how to code. I can hack it. If I have to, I can throw some code together, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. Everything is self-taught. I don't have a media background. I don't have even a writing background. Although I did all of those functions. It's really just a do it yourself approach. And I believe that served. I think that just jumping in and touching everything and getting familiar with it allowed me then to make better hiring decisions later on, because I could speak very intimately to the problem sets, and I know the pain points personally. But no special background. And so,
and what did you do as a career? Like how did it evolve because from there you pretty quickly got into this, but what did you do when you first left uni?
Yeah, so I was a technical recruiter for a little bit. I was also in the military, so I was in the reserves, but in the National Guard here in the U.S. But that was part-time. So again, it wasn't really a full-time thing, and I didn't have any special skills. It was kind of the same thing. I had a degree, and that's kind of what got me hired. A degree, and I interviewed well. But that's about it. There's no special background. I at the time didn't have any financial backing, didn't have any friends and family I could go to for money. So it had to be bootstrapped.
Awesome. And then when you got into this journey, you were obviously you're married with kids. How many kids do you have now? Because this is particularly relevant for everyone.
Yeah, this is interesting. So we have 3 kids. My oldest is 5, just turned 5, and I have a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old.
So congratulations. Everyone in our community can well appreciate the journey you've got on, and that. So how, like, everyone there is sitting there going, okay, how did you do this? Like, going from, you're working, 3, new family, married, everything. You must have a very supportive wife as well.
Yeah. So honestly, this is a good, good thought experiment. If I had to start over today with 3 children, and all the things that go along with that, it would be very hard to jump off the deep end, so to speak, into the unknown.
Yeah.
At the time, I was recently married. My wife was a teacher. I had, this job, and it's kind of like, what do we have to lose at that point? Worst case scenario, if I stumbled a little bit, I could always go back to that cubicle. But I also think, my wife, she was very supportive early on, and I was living in New Jersey, kind of in the metro New York area at the time, and there's a lot of traffic getting to and from work. So what she said is, I know you're not happy necessarily with kind of working in the cubicle. Why don't you stop at Starbucks or, Panera Bread here, little chain, and just do your work, and just spend an hour, 2 hours, rather than sitting in traffic, working on your websites, and then come home.
Cool.
And that worked out really well. Just, little consistent effort over time to get that traction to the point where I was making a few $1,000s a month. And at the time, that was enough for me to justify leaving the job behind. And just kind of going from there, and first, I think at the first level of kind of, I guess, happiness is, you quit the day job. That's a big milestone.
Yeah.
And the next one is, okay, you have a lifestyle business. You're making maybe as much as you would, 10, 20 years down the road as a senior level person in whatever career field you left. That's another, because if you're looking at someone mid-career, that can be what you're shooting for. It's not just a few $1,000s a month. This needs to be equal to or better than what I'm leaving at this stage. So then you get to that point, and then a great lifestyle business. And then, had that for a while, but I realized I kind of wanted to do more. At some point I got kind of almost bored of just the lifestyle aspect, as fun as it is not to have to do anything if you don't want to. I realized there's a bigger opportunity here to build something big and build something quote unquote great. And that's where we kind of started thinking of ourselves as a media company, although we're not, that's not our origin story. We're not, some newspaper that transitioned online or some private equity company that bought up a bunch of media properties. We are kind of bootstrapped, homegrown. We're still a lifestyle business at heart. I'm here in my home office. No other employees that are with me here. Everyone's remote. We have a diversified team all over the world.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think that stopping at Starbucks, it's really cool that your wife suggested that, because I think that inevitably set you up long term. One thing I noticed with you, and like when I was speaking to you the other day, you're more than happy to play the long game here. Like you said, you're patient. You're more like me. Liz, my wife, she was the one that figured out how to buy these websites because she wanted it straight away. But even that still takes time. But I think it's one thing that people need to realize. You mentioned to me the other day, even though at the time it seems like it takes a long time, when you look back at your journey now, you think, wow, it's actually so quick, really. Like within 3 or 4 years, what you've been able to achieve is it's just, phenomenal, really.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, this concept from Asia or from Japan called Kaizen or Kaizen.
Kaizen, yeah.
It's continuous improvement and consistent improvement, just optimizing a little bit every day. I think it can get really overwhelming if, you try to say, oh, I want to build this giant portfolio overnight. And I didn't set off to do that. It was a very natural evolution.
Yeah.
I call it the stair step. I mean, this is actually Rob Walling. He's a software founder, but I heard a talk from him once, and he referred to it as the stair step approach. That's kind of how success goes and business goes in my experience. It's not a linear up and to the right hockey stick. It's you get to a new plateau of learning or success, and then you figure out, do you want to stay here? And it's okay to stay there, but And then what's the next step? And so what does that mean? How do you have to get to that next step? And so that's kind of how I look at it. We're stair stepping our way to becoming a mature media company.
And then I guess that the final, like your plan now is talking of going to those steps. As you build these portfolios, is your plan to hold those websites for the cash flow and the asset value, or are you going to be selling out of, say, your 25? Will you selectively sell them off? What's the overall exit plan?
Yeah, so I look a lot like beyond the niche selection process. My role, kind of as the head, is the capital allocator. It's about making the decisions on what to do with capital and how to mitigate risk. That's why we do the portfolio approach, because it's portfolio theory. It's, some sites are going up, some sites are going down. Yeah, every Google update, I don't lose sleep anymore because I know some sites went down. I know some sites went up. I don't care. They all shake out in the wash. Eventually, if I look at the year over year numbers, it's 50% growth, 100%, 150% growth. It's the same story every year. It's just, if you tried to pick the winners individually, you drive yourself nuts, because that can be very nauseating. But yeah, so the goal right now is to really kind of leverage what we have as far as we can. And I think, my macro thesis is that there's a whole lot of lifestyle entrepreneurs and micro operators like myself. There's a whole lot of huge media companies and big players in Amazon, FBA, and other e-commerce trends, SaaS, that are trying to get into the content game from the top, but there's very few folks in the middle. And so I kind of see my role as filling that gap in the middle. And so to your point of, do we sell, do we buy? I do strategically, when we do these portfolios, in our financial modeling, we build out maybe exiting 20 to 30% of the sites every, 2 to 3 years, and then and using the proceeds to then launch more sites. So, let's say we have a 10-site portfolio. So a good example, we launched a portfolio 2 years ago with $250,000, or 3 years ago, well, a little over 2 years, with $250,000 for 10 sites. This was our first kind of experiment. And about 2 years later, or just a little bit over 2 years, the portfolio has exceeded, in terms of asset value, has exceeded $500,000 in asset value.
Right.
So we can then say that our first go around, that we've kind of 2x the asset value. And then we can say, look, we can sell one or two of these more mature sites, let's say for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and still have some of the other ones that are earning. So you're not going to zero and starting from scratch. You have this base, and then you can launch 10, 20 more sites, and then do that all over again. If you do that at scale, you build that Excel spreadsheet way out into the future, you can see how the compounding nature at multiple levels, works out over time. But I do believe that you should cycle in and out of some percentage of your holdings as a risk mitigation method. And ideally, you either double down with more sites, or you take that risk off, some of that risk off the table completely, and just say, you know what, I'm going to take that, pocket that, put that in something boring like real estate. And, that's the best way to mitigate risk, is to cash out at some point. Not everything, but some portion of it.
So in general, your long-term buy and hold, and then occasionally too, will you still look to acquire websites? Would you look to buy websites?
So I would say we're very interested in micro acquisitions. So anything under $100,000 or so, that we feel like we can leverage content on. And so ideally it's an aged kind of site that has some good content, but that we can there's a wide open niche. We can double down and, produce 200 articles and get a net positive ROI on those. I think in terms of a larger acquisition, it would have to be like right through the wickets, in terms of, we have proven content expertise in the vertical with writers ready to go. I've done the keyword research. I know it's a good vertical. I would want to know, we have the monetization partners lined up, and ideally there's some quick wins, like we can switch an affiliate or move from Ezoic to Mediavine or whatever, or some ad network arbitrage. So I would go bigger. It just would have to be a perfect perfect site, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's just been unreal. Do you have, because you've got a good feel for where our community's at, they're starting out on this journey. When you look back over your your journey, like, you know, from starting in those Starbucks days on the side of the, you know, on your way to work. Do you have any like quick final bit of advice that you could give to someone starting out, or something that key that you've learned over that time?
Yeah, I would just say, the consistency really pays off. If you just take a little bit of steady action every day, every week, whatever the cadence is, and just keep at it. There's no quick wins. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
You have to get in the arena and get some reps. And, I would say, and just do that approach of fire bullets and cannonballs. You can do it on a micro level, even if you have one site. The fire bullets and cannonballs would be, if you have one site and say you have a pet site and you publish articles in 4 or 5 different categories, but all of a sudden you discover that, dog collars, you're ranking number 1 for. Well, then take your capital, and rather than spread it wide, first go deep into that, other dog collars, different variations, like really own that vertical. If the data is telling you there's something there. And so I think just internalize that, and because it can get very easy getting distracted. And I'm one to talk, right? Because we have over 100 websites.
That's right.
but we've done it. I've tried to do it in a more disciplined way, where we're not chasing things. We're listening and collecting feedback on what do we have, what is the asset we have today, and what is it telling us about where we should publish our next article.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That's perfect. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome.